We will now start the panel discussion, and we need you for that. So, yeah, you can leave, but we need you, so please stay. So I'd like to invite Dominik, Marianne, Claire, and Camille on stage, and the other speakers, including the presenters of the podium, of the posters. I hope you're in the room. You all participate in the discussion about the opportunities, the difficulties, the challenges that we face when we want to do multidisciplinary research. Because what you've seen this morning is, to some extent, monodisciplinary aspects, building blocks. But that's not the issue. How do we make it multidisciplinary, and how do we solve issues that we are facing to make livestock production more sustainable? So, Marianne and I will chair this session, but you are more than welcome to ask questions to the panel, questions that you wanted to ask but you didn't have time, or you were not given the opportunity to raise the issue. But just for a start, we put this on the program, the issue of multidisciplinary research, and talking about the opportunities and the difficulties. And we will deal with both of them during the discussion. But if you look at nutrition, genetics, reproduction, physiology, health, and we as a scientific community, or as a community at large, we go to a farmer and say we have difficulties to make it really multidisciplinary, I think he would start to laugh. Because he's doing it on an everyday basis. He's dealing with reproduction, he's dealing with genetics, he's dealing with nutrition, and in the evening he's doing his finance and he's doing the economics. So why do we as a community have so much difficulties to make it multidisciplinary, whereas on the field it's a day-to-day business? Who wants to respond? Marianne.
Well, I'm not sure of my answer, but as I said, to be able to make proof and facts in terms of science, so the instrumentation we need implies reduction. That's the way we built our discipline. So, and more we know, more we reduce, actually. So we are not in a systemic approach, and I think most of the farmers have this systemic approach and accept some indicators which we don't find enough precise, I would say, but which for them is enough for conducting their process. So we are trying to understand things, but they also want to manage things. And it's different. You don't have the same way to approach words if you want to manage something or if you want to understanding it in depth. Sometimes you need to understand in order to manage, but not always. I don't think I understand how my motor is working, but I still manage to conduct my vehicle. So,
yeah, I wanted to add something else. Farmers do a lot of multidisciplinary tasks, but often also they work within a community, as we do. And generally they exchange within their own community, so within their own worldviews. And this is what we have also. We worked as geneticists, immunologists, epidemiologists. We all have some kind of joint enterprise and common language and a repertoire. And this is actually, this creates boundaries. But they are flexible. So, sorry. So, yeah. I think we are all in the same boat. So farmers are having the same struggle as we have. And when you look at veterinarians, farmers kind of relationship, you can see that the borders are, you can shape them, you can move them, you can block them, as we will do. So it's not they are doing the best and we are lacking. I think we are all struggling, because I think it's part of our way of being as humans. We are quite in our way of seeing things, and and we have difficulties of compromising, perhaps, and trying to also lift the head, because sometimes we have many pressures, like farmers do, with the work we are doing. And this perhaps is the things to do, to think it is time gaining than to lose a bit time now to try to discuss together, to plan a bit better the future. It's not lost time.
It is going, perhaps, yeah. This is probably going to be a real challenge, because our capacity to observe in all the areas of biology is massively increasing. So the fragmentation that you indicated, I mean, we will probably go more and more for smaller fragments. How do we go back to solutions?
Perhaps we will reach the crisis point where we will see, because we always work with crisis. There is a big crisis, and then we think, oh, we really need to change. But I think I won't monopolize the board. But I think we can do. The fact we believe in it, we can do it. It's just to think that it will be with a lot of sweat and energy, and but it will be very rich. And this is how we might change some things, because the world is running so fast.
Yes, from this, I would say, from the scientist part. You see, what we want to be competent. We want not to dilute too much the questions. So that is an issue, to find a good balance between the reduction, you mean, and the very complex questions we want to address. And when I discuss with students or PhD doctorates or candidates, they are afraid of not being very competent if they combine too many disciplines. So I think our responsibility is to make them confident that even if they share their expertise in various disciplines, the added value of this combination will help to do a better job. But there is a kind of fear of that. So I think we have to train the young scientists to be confident in this type of working. And it's not so easy. And the initial background during the PhD is a major time and a major way of starting the scientific career. So really, I think it's our responsibility to set up programs where they have the possibility to be very competent by combining disciplines. And I'm not sure that all universities all around the world work the same way in this transdisciplinarity. In France, it's not very well done. In Spain, I think it's much better done. So we have to also to pay attention to how students are trained in various countries, because sometimes these boundaries are felt very differently.
Any reaction? Yes.
Hello, Frederik from INRA. Thanks a lot for this very interesting session on this very relevant topic. I myself, I did a PhD on a very clear-cut practical problem in intensive pig production in Flanders, and we tried to set some initial steps on multidisciplinary approaches. And as an animal scientist with a bit of interest in economics, so not the sociology kind of things, it's very hard to get into those basics, and when you grasp the basics, you get the feeling we can never be right or wrong. Everybody is wrong and everybody is right, so we cannot be normative anymore. But then how will we proceed, and do we then also in training of students and senior scientists need psychological assistance to learn how to deal with this issue that's in your mind? That's one thing that I would like your insight on.
Dominik, you have you can respond.
Actually, I would like to make a comment, but not directly answer to Frederik. Well, for some diseases or some issues, I think multidisciplinary approach is necessary, is required, because as a single group or person, you do not have the knowledge in all these areas to tackle the problem good. For some items, it may not be possible or warranted at the first stage to see it at the population level, and first you need to start with a simple model and then try to see whether the results are there, and then see whether you can apply it at a more population level. So that's always the tricky thing. If you, just an example, if you do not know whether a vaccine will work, well, you don't test it in a large group of animals, but first you start in a small experiment, and if it works, then you go stepwise and try to extrapolate it. For some other conditions, well, you just observe what you see in the field, and you, let us say, can generate some hypotheses in that way, and then from that you can test some of the most interesting hypotheses in a more clear-cut way. So you can work in both directions depending on the condition or the problem. But my comment that I wanted to make is, you made that the statement that the farmer is every day busy with multidisciplinary approach. This is true. But going regularly on pig farms, I also have the impression that for some issues there is still blindness. These are professional farmers, but sometimes it's really necessary that someone from external comes there and open the eyes for a condition that may be improved. And in pig farms, it's currently the issue of optimizing production, health, and things like that. It's not only the production as such, but we try to optimize it. And for that, it's very important that different professionals guide the farmer to optimize that. And backwards, for us, it's also important to get feedback from the farmer. Is it really practical, possible to implement what we recommend, and what is the cost of it, and things like that. So from that point of view, I always find it very enriching if you can come on a farm and you have a nutritionist, someone who is specialized in the climate. We are more specialized in health, to discuss an issue and try to solve, so that the farmer is not guided by that person in this direction, by another person in another direction. So that's, and he has to make the decision.
On your declaration that the first step you might not need everybody, I think that Camille was
Yeah, I want to react to the two things. But I think, well, I'm a bit, from my background, I really was educated as a, well, I did epidemiology, so statistical modeling, things that are quite linear, and the more I applied them, the more I could observe that there were always negotiations between scientists, the p-value, we put this number, we should put this one, let's see how, and it started to make me wonder actually on what rely all our recommendations and guidelines. And I think one of the important things, because we all have different backgrounds, but trained as an animal doctor, we are trained as people who need to have the answer in front of the client. And because otherwise we would lose face, perhaps. And I think one of the things would be perhaps to just admit that we all are limited, and that we suggest something, but we might discuss on farm and see that actually our history of the animal is lacking of some information, and we implement it, and then we come to a common decision. And it won't neglect the fact that we have knowledge that the farmer won't have, but also it will acknowledge that the farmer has knowledge that we don't have. So this would be, for me, I feel this is something that would really help students, and also help their personal life also, in a way that you are not afraid, you don't feel losing face. It's very hard. So I think this would help a lot. And then, again, I'm always very skeptical with this. You use the term blindness, which disturbed me a bit, because I think we are all blind in our way. And I think perhaps sometimes, yes, they don't know things, but it's because they have other things in mind that are priorities for them. So their priorities might not be your priorities. And because they have a business to make a life, this is their life. So they have a rhythm to continue. So they will treat in a way for some disease because it's convenient. So I think animal health scientists would really, really gain in incorporating the dynamics of the systems animals are living in, understanding the social component, the economic component, the health component, and the environmental component. And of course, this is very complex, but it can be reduced. All stories are complex, but they still can be said in a way that is quite simple.
Just to go on a bit further, it's about what I spoke this morning about being reflexive. It's, as you said, we are all normative, and farmers as we, and we have all in mind some reduction that we do, but being conscious of these is the first step for me. And teaching the students to do that is important for me. And for example, if you look at most of our papers, we start sustainability is a big issue, and then whoop, you will find the gene number X. Well, I'm sorry. And I try to teach my students that this is not the way to do things. So you don't have a big claim and then just say this will solve the problem. I remember, I don't know if you know Sonico, who was belonging to those who discovered the HIV genome. And once they discovered the genome, they went in front of the whole journalists and they had to say, yes, we have the answer now, we know how to solve the problem, but they didn't. And he said, at that time, because I didn't know what to say because we had not the solution, we just say, well, we somehow saw the face of it, but well, so they turned, you know, but he decided to really change his way to look at things because he said, no, it's not the way. So I think we have to teach people to be a bit more, a bit less saying we will answer the big issues. And it's not a problem. I mean, it's if we also need to understand things, not only for solving problems, but also because this is a faculty we have as human also to try to understand, but then be modest and not say that we will solve the problem of the humanity.
Reaction? Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think really that's a very important point, and my impression as a scientist is that the main barrier is due to the pressure that we get from the scientific research system, which is to publish. And when you submit a paper, well, that's how you get your lab, your money, etc. So that's the main pressure. And whatever you submit as a paper, the referee will ask you for mechanisms for going to a specific and very precise results that you dig really in depth, and so in order to circumvent this, because that's the value, right, of your scientific work, that you publish in that type of journals and with this type of results, then in order to counteract this, then there are many solutions, but maybe there would be journals that promote transdisciplinarity work that would help that situation, and mainly on top of that is grant agencies and how they make their program, incitative programs, to promote this, and from there I think there could be solution for that. you need to make it possible with memes and recognition. And the main thing is also recognition, and that's the whole system.
There are some journals, and even science is a journal where you can publish multidisciplinary work. So you have the publication, and if you look at most of the projects now, I mean, the programs, the goal, they ask for multidisciplinarity. But then it's the way it is assessed, which is a problem, because when we assess it, we don't most of the time accept program where risks are taken. So the problem is more risk-taking, and how we accept that there is uncertainty, that we can't have it in a project where all the steps are defined and things are already like that. So it means that we might need an ongoing assessment during the project or whatever, I don't know. But what I remember, the NEH and the NIH in the US, they make a first selection of projects. And then they say, well, we put on the side all different projects. Now look this project again and see the one who take risk. And then they fund some of these projects. So I find this is also one solution to do things. We don't have this in France, unfortunately. In Europe,
Michael from Italy, and one question. You talked earlier about farmers. What about pushing information up? Not from the science, but down. Not from the science down, but from the farmers up. Do you hear me like this? Okay. We have now some generations of farmers, especially in the niche bio sector, where they invent a lot. Some of this has a scientific validity, and some part of this not. But you don't see many of this stuff researched. How do we take care of this, that we don't lose some methods, management, or feeding systems that they invented, and it stays in their system?
You want to respond on this one?
No, it's the next question.
It's this question. Who is answering his question?
Well, I guess there are some researchers doing that and looking at farmers' innovation and trying to assess them or to support farmers in spraying them, I would say. This is a trend of research too, but it's inductive research and not deductive research. And I don't know how it is in other countries, but in France we are not trained for inductive processes. We are much more trained for deductive or hypothetical deductive processes. And it's not such an easy work to do inductive processes. So maybe with data, big data, things will change because they also need inductive processes. But for the time being, it's quite unusual.
I just wanted to add something also. As Marianne said, there are a lot of work done involving farmers in research, and in the animal health sciences, it's much more recent that we started to do that, and that we started to use qualitative approaches and more inductive approaches. But still, the way it is done is very instrumental. So generally, we say we do qualitative research, but we either do a closed-ended questionnaire or an internet survey with questions we decided, and then ask the farmer to tick the box. And in this way, the information can't go up. So I think there is a real work to be done for us to acknowledge the value of qualitative approaches and understand what it really means, and stop thinking that because it's not number, it's less robust, and stop thinking that also the way the design of qualitative research is made is not robust. Because generally, from my poor experience, because I am still doing it, I would do it all my life, but I'm very new in the field, I can see how much more transparent it is in social sciences sometimes than it is in quantitative sciences.
So p-values are not sacred.
But I think that also one answer, it's not an answer but an autocritic of your question, is that what we don't do well at all is that often during a project we plan meetings that we are going to share the results with the farmers, stakeholders and so on, but we don't make these meetings before starting the project to go to the farmers and stakeholders and ask for what they have been doing already, not to reinvent the wheel, and from that we could then write the proposal, which is, and we don't do that before because we are just busy often too much within scientists and not outside of scientists to write a proposal, and we make these meetings to go with farmers during the project, whereas we should do it also before, much before in hand. So that's a mistake we do all, and we always think, oh, next time I will do that, and we don't do it because we are running out of time, and I think that's a big thing we don't do well.
I just have one comment on this, because since we are looking, for instance, in my field, we are looking for predictive markers, okay? So we want to know what is the portability of these predictive markers. So we want to know what is happening in the true life. I would say that the farms are the true life. Our experimental farms are intermediate true lives because animals are produced like in, I would say, true life, but the health status is very high most of the time. So even if we do not construct projects at the very beginning when we are looking for biomarkers, for instance, with producers, very quickly we will need to go and to include farmers in order to diversify the environments, to test in organic farms, and to test also virus genetics. So I think that we have to diversify the different farms where we want to test the different biomarkers we are searching now and that we can identify. And I think that even if it is not always at the very beginning, there is always a time to start this collaboration that will help to know how efficient we are at these biomarkers. Because we are moving forward in predictive biology for health protection, so we do that very well for genetics. But we can also have new types of phenotypes that can predict phenotypes over lifetime, and then we need to have access to these true life farms. And I'm quite confident that if we work well, we can exchange on this during the frame of these complex issues we address with health and production. Question?
I'd like to hook on this point with my question. I fully agree on the last three speakers that for example, farmers, where there's more people outside us scientists, add their building blocks too. They're not just instruments to help us on our questions or to test our solutions, but that our solutions are built up from all kinds of entries next to the question, the knowledge we deliver, if we do all things good. If we rephrase the question Jaap raised, then we have complex problems, but we have disciplines. That's in fact, we reduce, etc. About 5 years ago, we had a few transdisciplinary projects evaluated, and the advices we got were exactly the points that were raised by the panel earlier this morning. And the two main advices we received were, one, add boundary objects. I didn't understand what it was, but they were mentioned this morning twice or three times also. And the second one was combine reflection and reduction. Sorry, not reflection. Reduction. Us animal scientists make the problem smaller to get our own solution and then publish it, but that is not always a solution to the problem. That's our job. Okay, otherwise we can't publish it, generally. Add to that reduction, add some constructivist people. And we tested those two advices together in a summer school with Lucille 4 years ago, with about 20 PhD students. We gave them complex problems. We tried them to give them boundary objects, so something you have in common, which you build from all sides, but you have to build something, not analyze something. And it worked. In the groups that had someone who was able to step out of his discipline and said, okay, I'm not interested in my discipline, but in the solution we make together. So I think the first three speakers this morning gave added by building blocks later on, really help us to see that we have to design our projects more than from disciplines. And I'm very interested how Saphir and Jehl do this because the presentations, all of them I saw from those two projects, are all building blocks and not the advices you gave in the earlier of this session. So I'm much interested in that too from the panel.
Reaction to the coordinators. Reaction from the coordinator?
Reaction from the coordinator. Yeah, I fully agree. I think that's one of the challenges in these projects, that you reduce the problem to a number of small elements and you have to start building up. And for those of you who knew Lee Boltman, who was a modeler, he said that he was a biochemist basically and worked a lot on mathematics. In his early career, he did that. He reduced complex problems to smaller problems again. He realized in his career that he has to go back, and one way of doing that is by using models, using integrative approaches, perhaps even qualitative approaches to see the bigger context. In UGent, we have a full work package on modeling. We have a full work package on looking at the building blocks that we propose on feeds, on genetics, etc. To look, well, what is the feasibility of that? What's the environmental impact of that? What's the cost-benefit analysis of that? Working with stakeholders, because the stakeholders eventually are the ones who are going to use the building blocks or further develop the building block that we propose. And all these projects, Sapphire and UGent, they're not proposing full-fledged solutions. They are giving directions in where we can go. And that is also the reason that we do not stick just to this session this morning, but also go this afternoon, because with stakeholders, we have to discuss how we can pick up the building blocks that we make. We're not going to make a house. We make perhaps a plan, but it has to be developed further by different stakeholders. So modeling is one tool, but the direct interaction, and I think one word, we've talked a lot about multidisciplinary research. What we haven't talked about much is multi-actor approach. UGent is a multi-actor approach. Saphir, not by name, but I think by construction, to some extent it is. There are different actors involved. And that's absolutely the way Europe wants to go. So they want to go where people, not just from different disciplines, but also different stakeholders, different people who have an impact and have a role, have something to say about the issue that we're dealing with, are directly involved, not just in applying it, but in the very construction of the problem, in the definition of the problem, in the definition of the boundaries. So that's my response. I don't know if the coordinator of Sapphire, no? Sure, yeah, then they open.
I fully agree with your views and also the comments that were raised. But on the other hand, I think in the past we have also been successful for some diseases, for instance, Rogel-Gaillard disease. We eradicated in a large part of the world. Cowpox, other diseases, we were successful, and maybe it could have been faster or more efficient, but the virologist, immunologist, and finally also the epidemiologists showed that although we did not have a perfect vaccine for Rogel-Gaillard disease, at population level we could reduce the transmission under a certain threshold and we could eradicate it. But it's not always easy, and I fully agree with the statement of Isabel that there is a pressure to publish, and if you have a good experiment, a good aim that has been practical relevance, but your results are not what is expected, it's not easy to publish. So if you would have a journal of negative results, it would be a very big one, but it's not easy to get it published. So from that point of view, indeed we should not overemphasize what we have found, but on the other hand, maybe you need 5 failed PhD students in order, or PhD projects or outcomes in order to end up with a successful one and to make one step progress in elucidating a control measure for a disease, for instance, or another aspect.
Yeah, thanks, Jaap. Yeah, I think we need in-depth research, of course, disciplinary, but also the integrated research. And what I was already stated, it's important. I think you said it in the beginning, think about communication. You see now when universities are judged or research institutes, they look at scientific quality and at social impact. And that means also the multi-actor approach, stakeholder approach that you have in Feed the Gene. I like that very much, because if you see if production is increasing, it's not only nutrition or breeding, it's breeding, nutrition, health all together. But in other aspects we have to deal with, and more in the coming decades, is the public opinion. And I think that's really what we're facing, and that's where independent, objective research is extremely important. I see it in the Netherlands, country where I'm from. We have in the parliament now 5 people from the 150 who is the party of the animals. That's just one issue, just animals. And more or less they are very critical about animal production, intensive animal production, and use a lot of arguments. We have to get rid of pig or poultry production, or just extensive, only outdoor, and those kind of discussions are coming. And therefore it is important that the people in research can say, hey, this is really facts, this is how it is. Also the new technologies coming, there are coming a lot of new technologies. If we look back, we have a huge discussion in the EU on GMO. You see CRISPR-Cas, which was in the parliament, a discussion a few months ago with opinions, where some researchers said, yeah, what is deciding? And I think we did not a good job in communication as scientists, what it means. So a lot of people don't trust new technologies. And that's where we have to stand up and say, hey, this is facts and this is not facts. And that's also we're asking the panel, how can we do maybe a better job of be prepared for the future where we get more and more discussions. I see it also if we apply for animal experiments. You have an animal ethical committee. In a lot of experiments, the first question is this only to improve or to increase average daily gain or production? Then we should not do it. You see, that's the perception in the minds of a lot of people. And we have to respond, I think, as scientists and international. Some countries it's stronger as another, but for sure it will be a discussion point for the coming decade.
I think I disagree a bit with you. I'm sorry about that. But because I think we all have value, as I said. And when we say that we are objective as scientists, we are not. I don't agree on that. So we try, and that's what makes a difference. We try to develop instrumentation in order to be the most objective we can. But we have to recognize that we already have made some choices because we prefer intensive production, maybe instead of other. So we don't have more importance in political decision making than other people, and so we don't have the truth. We just have more maybe way to instrument our demonstration. So my view is that we need to always balance. That's why I say we need to balance between robustness and social relevance, because we are always struggling in between these things, and we have to recognize that social relevance at one moment is maybe not the one later on, and because people's opinions change and so on. So that was my answer to you.
I just wanted to add on my own comments on the fact that we, as scientists, we always base our observational tools and also design that we formulate, and the tool has got their limitations. I worked on the helmets in cattle. The study aimed to see the production effect of helmet infection. My indicator was serology, milk, and obviously trying to see associations between volume of milk and titers of antibodies. And you can obviously recognize that you can take the thing in two ways. So you might have high titer of serum and low production of milk, it might be related to production impact, but it might be related to dilution effect. And generally we frame it, oh, it's a production effect because this suits us a bit more. So I think the first thing would be to acknowledge our limitation, and I would add that negative results in this case are also very important to show and are very important to publish. In this actual study, I struggled, and the reviewer said, well, what are you showing, because you are not showing anything. No, the point is to say, well, actually the tools I used was, the design was the most I could do, really, taking the most accurate data, recording, going to farm every week. I couldn't do anything more. But then even though my results were debatable, and I think this was related to my tool, my indicator, and all the indicators that actually in the almond field people are using to just prove there is an impact of almonds, so we need more intervention. So yeah, I would say acknowledge our limitations and publish negative results are critical.
Yes, I had one question and one comment. One question is about the multi-actor involvement. I am surprised that the participatory sciences have not been spoken about yet, because it's exactly the answer to this concern of involving the stakeholders from the beginning and not only to asking them their needs, but it is another way to conduct research. So 2 years ago there was a report published in France to set up the terms of reference of this way of doing science, and there are many options. There is not a perfect model of doing participatory science, but it is always taking more time than a classical project. And then maybe this could be a question for the EU Commission. Do they ask, or are they willing to support participatory science project at a large scale with the different assessment criteria? Because at the moment, at least in France, there are such projects like that. A few of them have been supported by the National Research Agency, others by different sort of either regional money or different solutions. And but the interest is growing, at least at INRA. So there is this terms of reference. There has been École Chercheur, so a 1 week training with the participants from NGOs and from different research institutions. And well, INRA is about 8,000 people altogether, and I think in a survey there were 200 or 300 people answering that they are either starting or willing to explore this way of making research. And but it needs to set up its rules of quality to avoid having just discussing and nothing coming out. So this is my first, well, I don't know whether some of the colleagues had an experiment or have experimented the participatory science project. And regarding the other question of general communication, at the moment what we are experimenting, but at the institutional level at INRA, is having general agreement with the NGOs involved in environment protection. And typically we have this recent agreement with the France Nature Environnement, so France Nature Environment, which has been publishing newspaper criticizing agriculture and agriculture research a lot. And so, but they are still interested in having this general agreement with INRA because they finally told us we have I don't remember the word in English, but they have a political message they want to deliver. But they are concerned that this political message should not be completely opposite to current knowledge. So they are willing to have this general agreement with INRA so that they can organize some meetings with some experts that INRA will identify to check that what they are putting into their political message is not completely out of objective, as much objective it could be, evidence. And so it's a tricky exercise because, as has been said, we are never fully objective. But when they agreed to sign this agreement with INRA in general, it was their main motivation. And for us, it was rather the motivation to set up joint research projects. So we had different motivations, so we tried to set up in the agreement that we are also willing to work with them in order to identify research priorities more fitting their concerns. And they are expecting us to send experts in some group discussions so that they can elaborate their message.
Okay, thank you. We are approaching. We are approaching the end. Sorry. I'm not finishing yet. Huh? We are approaching the end, and I think it's nice. I would like to. I don't want you to leave with negative aspects. I think we want to finish with opportunities. You provide an opportunity. You said about teaching, and perhaps also the young scientists. I mean, we are asking them, in fact, to some extent. Well, okay, I don't say we have messed up, but we provide solutions. We should do it like this, and we should provide training. How do you feel about that? I mean, you're trained now. You're trained now. Are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable with what they say? Or Felix or Mathilde, you want to respond? Are you comfortable with?
Yeah, thank you for a very interesting discussion. Yeah, I completely agree with all of the comments. We cannot like the farmer, they deal with multidisciplinary works every day, but they cannot solve the problem with multiple causes. And we don't provide one solution. We just provide one aspect of the problems, and it has to be implemented in the future work. And like one of the comments from the back, we cannot have the expertise in all of the fields, and we don't expect students or even the senior scientists have the knowledge about everything, and we have to collaborate with each other, obviously.
So like Marianne was starting this finishing her talk saying that multidisciplinary approach needed a trusting process. Are you trusting the process then? Marianne was finishing her talk by saying that multidisciplinary approach needs to trust the process rather more than trusting the people. So are you trusting the process? That's right. And your neighbor too, that she can answer.
I believe on the process and also the people.
Okay, you are very good in diplomacy.
I think I will answer my own point of view as a young scientist, because I started my PhD almost 2 years ago now, and it feels I didn't know anything about microbiota at first. So I think if we want to involve our project with many collaborators and like stakeholders and other people, we first have to know what we are talking about. And that's the first point. But yeah, it's really interesting to work with others, like with feeding companies in my case, because they can be interesting in a practical way on my results. So that's really something we have to do with research, is to involve our research results as a practical field.
So I just have one. I want to add one comment. I think we cannot expect one scientist to have a very broad knowledge about everything, and if we involve too deeply in one aspect and we lose the other, it's obvious. Like for my own experience, I did my bachelor in veterinary, and this morning I listened to some presentation about vaccination, and it's already quite new for me. And then, after a few years, involved more in animal production, and I already lose the background a little bit about veterinary. And I think, it's obvious that we have to combine different projects together and learn from each other. And we cannot, one people can solve every problem.
There's an opportunity, huh?
Yeah, Candido Pomar from Canada. I'm just making a comment and a question is, until now, most of the innovation is coming from individuals. We have been trained to work individually with small groups, and we are producing that. That is solving some problems. But when the problems become more complex, we need the multidisciplinary approach. But more complex is the problem we have to solve. Largest has to be the group. My question is, we are talking here mostly like if we're scientists, the responsible of leading these multidisciplinary groups. My question is, I think when we reach some level of complexity, maybe it's not scientists that should be driving or leading these groups. Maybe because we are needing the producers to maybe leading some of the problems. Maybe the society, people from the society has to be part of these groups. So I don't think that we have to be always the leaders and those that are generating all these solutions. Solutions, I think, sometimes will need to come from other groups that are going to lead this. So the multidisciplinarity, I think, changes, depends of the complexity. And higher we are, maybe we are just going to be one part, the scientists, another part is going to be other part of the society.
Yeah, still one.
Actually, it's not a question, maybe a concrete opportunity. What I've learned from the past, and I'm happy to see this conference, that other views on animal production, the future has been debated on, which is very positive. And what I think about multidisciplinarity is it's the opportunity to learn from each other, not among researchers, but learn from people from NGOs, learn from farmers, learn from everybody what they have as knowledge. But the first thing everybody then has to learn first is to be a fair loser in its way, or to learn how to be open-minded. And maybe a concrete opportunity for us scientists is at the next conference to have a workshop on attitude building or training and getting an open mind for discussions.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else to make a final comment?
I would like just to go back to the societal demand, because our young researchers, they are in the society, so we need to be attractive also in our research issues. And I think that we have to combine producers, farmers, but also researchers and all stakeholders, that we all aim at changing methods, going for agroecological transitions, and that we want to combine different breeding goals, different breeding aims, and that we do not focus only on production, but we also focus on health, on welfare, and we don't want to optimize animals only for ourselves, but also to optimize the global ecosystem. And that is a very complex issue that is related to multidisciplinarity. But I think that we have to all together promote these new breeding objectives that need to renew the way we ask questions and we produce data and analyze the data. And if we agree on this, I think it is a step forward to have this new horizon where we can build up new types of programs that have already started.
I think we will not solve everything today, but I think we heard that we need a critical mass and diverse mass of people to address issues. Issues are more and more complex. We heard from Marianne also that it's a process. So do we have the instruments to address that? Like we see that if it's a process, that means that if we think differently on there would be new questions during a project. So normally projects we are responding like Safir, Fidogene are fixed because we have got deliverables, we have got plans, and is it not antinomic with transdisciplinary approach where we should create new questions and adapt? Are our projects flexible enough to change on the way we are thinking, and to let come new air, new brainstorming. I don't think so, but that means that we should have very complex instruments, project more flexible, and with the compromise with also the requirements for publication and career assessment. So I think it's a complex and one solution doesn't fit all, I believe.
Project coordinators we can give to Europe, because we know the benefits, but also the difficulties we have with that kind of approach to these complex problems. So I think that we should take up. It's a quarter, 20 past noon, so it's not over yet. Come back this afternoon at 2, because we will continue at 2, discussing with stakeholders, discussing with these multidisciplinary approaches. I'd like to thank the speakers, the people that participated in the roundtable discussion very much for your participation. I would like to thank you also for your participation, and I hope to see you back in an hour and a half or so. So have a good lunch and see you.